So if you guys have been wondering how the two hero talent trees pair up with each other, which one's better, what their strengths and weaknesses are, hopefully this should clear it up for you. Havoc Demon Hunter is looking to be powerful for the release of the War Within. Today we'll be taking a deeper dive into why and what Havoc is gaining through hero talents that is empowering them. Offensively, the hero talents work towards different goals, allowing you to swap between single target and AoE scenarios to perform best at both. At the same time, offensively, there are some powerful talents as well. What each tree excels at will be covered, and feedback on the remaining issues for the gameplay of both hero talent trees. Right. So the two hero talent trees we have are Aldrachi Reaver and Fel-Scarred. Aldrachi Reaver, Havoc Demon Hunters focus on Reaver's Glaive, which replaces Throw Glaive for your next cast every time you consume 6 Shattered Souls. So, as you guys break Lesser Soul fragments from your target, or on the ground, the little purple orb things, you pick up 6 of them, and it allows you to use this ability in place of Throw Glaive. So this is a brand new ability called Reaver's Glaive. After Reaver's Glaive is cast, the rotation ordering of Blade Dance and Chaos Strike is changed based on prioritizing single target or AoE DPS. So, with Reaver's Glaive, you press it, then you have a window of opportunity. Basically a combo that you can do, right? So you press Reaver's Glaive, and then you can either press Chaos Strike into Blade Dance to get a certain effect, or Blade Dance into Chaos Strike to get a different effect. If you're ending your combo with Chaos Strike, that gives you an amplified Reaver's Mark. So Reaver's Mark makes your target take more damage, essentially. And this is a single target debuff that you put on the target. So if you're fighting a boss and you press Reaver's Glaive, then you press Blade Dance into Chaos Strike, it's going to put a more substantial Reaver's Mark on your target. It's going to put a 14% damage increase on the boss. Now, if you were to go Reaver's Glaive, Chaos Strike into Blade Dance, the enemy is still going to get Reaver's Mark, but it's only going to get a 7% increased damage debuff rather than a 14. So just keep that in mind. And it works the other way too. So when you end your pattern with Blade Dance, you get this benefit, Fury of the Aldrachi. So when enhanced by Reaver's Glaive, Blade Dance casts 3 additional glaive slashes to nearby targets. So if you press Reaver's Glaive into Blade Dance into Chaos Strike, you're going to get the 14% Reaver's Mark, and you're going to get a basic proc of Fury of the Aldrachi, which is going to be 3 slashes. Now if you end your pattern with Blade Dance, you'll get the empowered version of Fury of the Aldrachi, which is 6 slashes instead. One thing to keep in mind is that these extra slashes from Blade Dance aren't actually Blade Dance slashes. They're a completely separate damage event, so they're not buffed by any Blade Dance talents that you might have. They're a completely different thing. It says they're extra slashes of Blade Dance, but they're actually just something else called Art of the Glaive. Okay, so that's how Aldrachi Reaver works. Fel-Scarred, on the other hand, empowers Metamorphosis to deal uncapped AoE damage and causes it to buff additional spells, focusing on increased AoE DPS. With Violent Transformation, there's a small rotational change to get Immolation Aura and Sigil of Flame on cooldown before and after casting Metamorphosis. So Violent Transformation, when you activate Metamorphosis, the cooldown of your Sigil of Flame and Fell Devastation are immediately reset. So that's for Vengeance, obviously. And for Havoc, when you activate Metamorphosis, the cooldown of your Sigil of Flame and Immolation Aura are immediately reset. So, you know, with our talent Chaotic Transformation, when you press it, it resets the cooldown of your I-Beam and your Blade Dance. Well, this is another talent just like that one, but now this is resetting Sigil of Flame and Immolation Aura. So this is a nice little chart, I guess, to indicate the strengths and weaknesses of each one. So Aldrachi Reaver. Strengths are very powerful single target, stronger defensively because of these talents here. Army unto oneself. Fellblade surrounds you with a Blade Ward, reducing damage taken by 10% for 5 seconds. It's pretty powerful, and we are pressing Fellblade pretty often because now Fellblade has a function baked into it where it will suck in any soul fragments that might be on the ground around you. So it's a very powerful ability to be pressing as often as you can. And then we also have Incorruptible Spirit. Each soul fragment you consume shields you for an additional 15% of the amount healed. Flexible between single target and AoE. Now the weaknesses of Aldrachi Reaver. There's a lot more to track. There's a lot more that you have to pay attention to and keep track of. If you felt that playing Havoc Demon Hunter was a little overwhelming in Dragonflight, it's probably just adding on top of that. Now there may be some possibilities where we play no mover, especially in Raid, and that really pulls back the complexity of playing Aldrachi Reaver. But as soon as you start incorporating movement on top of all of these other things to track, it begins to be a little overwhelming, especially for the less experienced player. It also has RNG swings based on soul spawns, so you are at the mercy of whether you're actually spawning lesser soul fragments or not. There are things in the tree that make it more likely to get soul fragment spawning, but it's still very RNG. It's punished on target swapping. So because when you end your pattern with a Chaos Strike and it puts Reaver's Mark on the target, that's a single target ability or a single target debuff that goes out. So if you want to get that debuff on multiple targets, especially if you're in like a cleave situation, like 2 or maybe even 3 targets, the only way to do that is to tab target and make sure that you're putting your Reaver's Mark on those multiple different targets. So definitely a bit of target swapping there, and then it just adds complexity, right? So let's read what the breakdown is here. When playing Aldrachi Reaver, your main priority is to use Reaver's Glaive as much as possible, when you can cast Blade Dance as your next global on single target, which increases your DPS to your target by 14% through Reaver's Mark, right? So what this is saying is when you use Reaver's Glaive, you want to use Blade Dance first, and then end it with a Chaos Strike to put a 14% Reaver's Mark on your target. In AoE, this changes to use Blade Dance second after Chaos Strike to deal more AoE damage from Fury of the Aldrachi. Due to Wounded Quarry, Aldrachi Reaver loses significant amount of DPS if you have to swap targets without a Reaver's Glaive prepared to be cast, as your soul generation will be drastically reduced. So Wounded Quarry, while Reaver's Mark is on your target, melee attacks strike with an additional Glaive Slash for 10% of attack power physical damage, and have a chance to shatter a soul. So while Reaver's Mark is on a target, it also has this Wounded Quarry debuff, which just makes it a little more likely that you're gonna get lesser soul fragments from that enemy. And again, if you're tab targeting, that means you're hitting mobs that may not have Reaver's Mark on them yet, so you're going to be proccing less soul fragments. Talent choices are affected as Accelerated Blade, Serrated Glaive, and Soul Scar all benefit the damage of Reaver's Glaive itself. So because Reaver's Glaive essentially just replaces Throw Glaive on your bar temporarily, you get one use of it, it does interact with your other Throw Glaive talents. So it gets the damage increase from Accelerated Blade, it does apply Serrated Glaive onto your target, and it does feed into Soul Scar, which is actually really good because Reaver's Glaive hits a lot harder than a regular Throw Glaive. So even if you're not pressing Throw Glaive rotationally and you're just pressing Reaver's Glaive anytime you have it available, you'll actually be getting a lot of Soul Scar damage simply from that. Sigil of Spite is now also taken purely due to soul generation. So Sigil of Spite used to be Elysian Decree, got renamed in War Within, and anytime you use Sigil of Spite, you will guarantee that you spawn 3 lesser soul fragments. You can take a talent called Soul Sigils, which then increases this by 1. So you always get 4 lesser soul fragments from Sigil of Spite. So that's Aldrachi Reaver. You're honestly just at the mercy of lesser soul fragments. You're using certain abilities to make sure you get them, like Sigil of Spite. Sigil of Flame will give you 1. And then, yeah, you're just tracking your Reaver's Glaive, deciding which benefit you want to get, whether it's the single target Reaver's Mark debuff on your target if you're fighting a boss, or there's like a prio mob in a trash pack. And the other option is just AoE, uncapped AoE from Fury of the Aldrachi. And so yeah, that is Aldrachi Reaver. Let's take a look at Fel-Scarred now. So the strengths of Fel-Scarred. uncapped AoE burst, increases power of Havoc baseline abilities, 2-minute burst focus, and easy to play. So it's definitely easy to play because you're not getting any new buttons. Well, that's not completely true. You're getting new buttons, but they're not extra buttons. So what happens is when you know how when you I-beam, your Chaos Strike and your Blade Dance turn into new abilities, right? They turn into Annihilation and Death Sweep. Well, now that is happening for more abilities in your toolkit. So now it's happening for I-beam, Immolation Aura, Sigil of Flame, and that's it. Those 3. So now you're getting those 3 on top of Annihilation and Death Sweep. And each time you use one of those newly empowered abilities, you proc Demon Surge. So Demon Surge is just uncapped AoE damage. It's a little explosion that happens from your character. So every time you press one of those new enhanced abilities, you do AoE damage around you. So the weaknesses: weaker defensively. Definitely weaker defensively. So Aldrachi has, the 10% damage taken, reduced damage taken from Fellblade. It also has more healing and a shield from Incorruptible Spirit from your soul fragments. Then if you look at Fel-Scarred, what we have here is 2 options. Set fire to the pain. 5% of all non-fire damage taken is instead taken as fire damage over 6 seconds. Fire damage taken reduced by 10. So the damage that this is reducing is actually very small because it's going through like 2 separate filters, right? First, the damage is getting filtered through the non-fire damage taken is instead taken as fire damage, or 5%. And then that 5% is then getting filtered down by 10%. So it's a very, very small reduction. The other option is improved soul rending. So leech granted by soul rending increased by 2% and an additional 2% while metamorphosis is active. So again, it's okay. We did lose a little bit of leech in the War Within. This helps make up for it, but it's really not that good. So those are the only defensive benefits of Fel-Scarred, other than you just being in demon form more often. So the other weakness of Fel-Scarred is poor single target and priority damage. So Fel-Scarred is really just like geared towards being mass AoE. So its single target damage obviously can't be super good as well, because then this hero talent tree would just be good at everything. And I know Havoc Demon Hunters love being the kings of everything, but you can't always be the best, okay? You gotta have your strengths, you gotta have your weaknesses. You can't just be the best all the time. So, when playing Fel-Scarred, you will be playing slightly differently around Metamorphosis as your large AoE burst window. Due to Violent Transformation and Chaotic Transformation, you must get all of Sigil of Flame, I-Beam, Blade Dance, and all Immolation Aura charges on cooldown before casting Metamorphosis, as they will all be reset. Right, so Violent Transformation is resetting Sigil of Flame and Immolation Aura, and Chaotic Transformation is resetting Blade Dance and I-Beam. Demon Surge causes you to deal uncapped AoE when using all these empowered abilities, greatly increasing burst through Demon Surge itself, as well as a 30% damage increase to core Havoc AoE abilities. So what happens with Chaos Strike and Blade Dance when they get empowered into Annihilation and Death Sweep is, while their icon is changing, right, you get the new ability, the new name, the new icon, the damage also gets increased by 30%. And that 30% is also happening with these other abilities that are now getting empowered: Sigil of Flame, I-Beam, and Immolation Aura. Okay. So, what has changed? Aldrachi Reaver mostly received changes to pathing and tuning since the first review. The soul generation from Wounded Quarry was increased, and even with the soul count of Art of the Glaive increasing to 6, you typically generate enough Reaver's Glaive charges to maintain debuffs easily. So, when I first tested this on Alpha, you needed 3 Lesser Soul Fragments to get a Reaver's Glaive, which was very, very low. Very, very low. And and you would just get it all the time. You would have Reaver's Glaive available constantly. So they buffed it up a little bit. 6 is, I would say even 6 is pretty easy to get. And they made a change, I would say about halfway through the beta, where using the hunt instantly gives you a use of Reaver's Glaive, which solves the big problem that we had, even at 6 or 3. The main problem that we had was we couldn't get enough souls in our opener to really make it happen. So now they have a function baked into the hunt where when you press the hunt, you get a free Reaver's Glaive. So you can get that right on your opener. You can line it up with everything else you need to do. And it works out well. The one mechanical change is that Warblade's Hunger gained the added benefit that Fellblade picks up and consumes up to 5 nearby soul fragments. So whenever you have soul fragments around you, your Fellblade icon is going to have a little number indicating how many souls it would scoop up if you were to press it. Just like how Vengeance works with whatever their ability is, Soul Bomb or whatever. It works the same way now. So it's really nice. Fel-Scarred. Fel-Scarred for the most part has received changes to tuning since the first review, however one functional change did take place. Demon Surge was changed to no longer increase HP and armor for Havoc while in Metamorphosis, instead increasing the Fury generation of Demon's Bite by 15, which nobody uses, and Demon Blades by 5, in an attempt to increase single target value. I think this was kind of a weird change that they decided to do. I mean, I get why they scrapped the increased HP and armor thing, because they're trying to make us not be as tanky. They want, players in general to not be as tanky. They want healers to have to do more. So I get why they did that. But giving us extra Fury, especially only 5 on Demon Blades, just doesn't sound like it's going to do much. I don't think Fury was ever an issue for us. And if we're overcapping on Fury already, an extra 5 isn't going to do much. So it was a weird choice, but hey, I guess we'll take it. I would have preferred to see something else, but it is what it is. Obviously, there's some facts that are going into this, but in the end, I think you guys should play whichever one you find the most interesting. Whatever one kind of suits your needs and your interests. They're both going to be close enough that if you don't want to play Aldrachi Reaver for whatever reason, you can play Fel-Scarred. If you don't want to play Fel-Scarred, you can play Aldrachi. So just keep that in mind. And also keep in mind, things are going to change. This is all based off of how they're both functioning right now. This could be different in a month. It could be different in a week, right? You never know. Class Fantasy and Visuals. Fel-Scarred is the winner. Of the two options, Fel-Scarred wins on Class Fantasy via buffing Metamorphosis and Demonic Windows to be greatly empowered while in demon form. Visually, neither hero talents offer any grand appearance with very little in the way of animations. This is very true. This is very true. Aldrachi Reaver, they throw Reaver's Glaive, but it's kind of just like a regular throw glaive with a little purple aura on it. And if you're throwing it in like close range combat, you just don't see it. You don't see it because it hits the mob and it disappears, right? So Aldrachi really doesn't have much visual to it. Fel-Scarred has a little bit, but definitely not as much as people were hoping it would have. So what people wanted was something for Demon Surge, obviously, which we got. I think that the spell effect for Demon Surge is still kind of lackluster. Could have been cooler. But what people really wanted were new spell animations for those new empowered spells that we're getting. So the new version of Immolation Aura, the new I-Beam, and the new Sigil of Flame, they all became new abilities. They're now, Abyssal Gaze, Consuming Flame, Consuming Fire, and Sigil of Doom. But they all look exactly how they used to, right? Sigil of Doom looks just like how Sigil of Flame does. It's a green sigil on the ground. I-Beam is still the same color. Immolation Aura is still the same color. So I think they really missed the opportunity that they had to make some really cool visuals for Fel-Scarred. Maybe that's something we'll get down the line, but the fact that we haven't seen it yet kind of leads me to believe that we're not getting any visuals for it. Fun and rewarding gameplay. Fel-Scarred is the winner again. Fel-Scarred changes how you enter your metamorphosis windows and greatly empowers your burst around cooldowns, which typically feels rewarding when executed correctly. Okay. True. I'll admit, it does feel really good to do your combo of seven demon surges, because you just see yourself skyrocket on the meters. You're doing so much uncapped damage back to back, and you're doing it on top of your big cooldowns, right? Every 2 minutes you're able to do it. And usually that's when you're lining it up with your damage potions. Maybe there's a bloodlust happening. Any other types of damage amps that you're lining your cooldowns to. It's all happening at the same time, so you do a lot of damage. Aldrachi Reaver feels more like constantly chasing to keep a debuff on your target, with downtime on your target causing issues of maintaining soul generation to maintenance buff yourself and debuff your target. All tied to a button that is not typically satisfying to hit. You know, I am very surprised. I'm very surprised at the answers and the winners that Shad is picking here, because I think we all kind of expected, based on how things have been going so far, that Aldrachi was just gonna win against Fel-Scarred in all categories. But I think the fact that Shad is saying, you know, class fantasy and visuals, Fel-Scarred is the winner. Fun and rewarding gameplay, which is, I would argue, is the most important category. Fel-Scarred is winning. Not what I expected, and I'm glad to see it. I'm glad to see it, because I know a lot of people just don't want to play Aldrachi Reaver. They're not interested in it, they don't like it, and they would feel forced into playing it because it does the most damage. So I'm really happy to see that Fel-Scarred is coming out ahead here. Difficulty. Fel-Scarred simply has you use more buttons before Metamorphosis is pressed, causing an intuitive and not largely impactful change to your rotation. Aldrachi Reaver, on the other hand, actively changes your rotation on each usage around an RNG variable in soul spawns to generate the glaives, while needing the correct order of ability casts after Reaver's glaive. You also talent Sigil of Spite over the entirely passive Collective Anguish for more soul generation, adding another rotational cooldown. Very interesting to see these choices. Defensive and utility, I think this one's a no-brainer. We kind of know that Aldrachi Reaver is defensively better, which I think is enough to potentially make it used in high keys, right? Like if you're doing super high keys where you need access to those types of defensives to live one-shots, Aldrachi Reaver might make it a choice that you need to consider at those high keys. But again, things might change. We don't know what both of these hero talent trees are going to look like once people get around to doing those high keys. Aldrachi Reaver brings Army onto oneself, which has a high uptime for great passive damage reduction, with the capability to flexibly use Fellblade as a defensive on an easy-to-access and decreased GCD button. So again, Army onto oneself gives you a 10% reduced damage taken buff for 5 seconds. So you can kind of time it, much like you would for the one on Blade Dance. Wounded Quarry and Aldrachi Tactics both spawn soul fragments, which turn into a moderate amount of self-healing. Aldrachi is lacking in utility, but makes up by being defensively stronger for relevant content. Okay, Fel-Scarred is weaker defensively with poor utility nodes. Wave of Debilitation has some value in Mythic Plus, however a 5-second duration on the attack speed / casting speed slow is of little use. Pursuit of Angriness, which is an awesome name by the way, gives a small amount of move speed, but Havoc has little use for the mobility offered. True. Defensively, Set Fire to the Pain is nice and a small damage deferral, however outside of encounters that are primarily fire damage, it provides little in actual DR and is simply weaker than Aldrachi Reaver's Army unto oneself. Okay, so leveling. So while you guys are leveling through the War Within, you're probably going to want to play Fel-Scarred, just because it's simple, and it's big for AoE pulls, so in dungeons and even just questing on your own, you can take care of big packs of mobs very quickly with Fel-Scarred. Fel-Scarred does better at AoE pulls and target swapping around low HP mobs that are typically found while leveling. Both hero talents can work fine, however Fel-Scarred is more flexible. Okay, and the big one here, Mythic Plus, Fel-Scarred. By design, Fel-Scarred does exactly what a hero talent class should do for Mythic Plus. bringing great amounts of uncapped AoE burst for dealing damage to large amounts of enemies. Aldrachi Reaver has some benefits over its counterpart that could see it played at the highest of key levels, mainly in higher priority target DPS and a powerful survivability tool in Army unto oneself that could be required to live certain mechanics. Yep. So I think for most people, you're probably going to play Fel-Scarred until you start doing higher keys where maybe you need to live one shots or whatever, you need more single target damage. Maybe you'll play Aldrachi. Could even be a case of, you know, Fortified versus a Tyrant at the start when you only have one of them on the key. You might choose to do that. But I think you'll be fine with either of them. They're both very good. Raid, Aldrachi Reaver. By design, Aldrachi Reaver is better suited to single target DPS with a lack of proper AoE to compare with Fel-Scarred. This will give it an edge in almost all raid encounters unless a specific tier set interaction or redesign pushes changes in the future. So, you guys will likely be playing Aldrachi Reaver in raid. The good news is, if you're playing it in raid, the other talents, the no-mover talents, are enough to sort of give it the advantage where you can get away with playing no-mover, like without playing inertia, and the whole gameplay loop of Aldrachi becomes a lot simpler in single target. If you don't have the movement talents and you're just fighting a single boss, your main focus is to just keep Reaver's Mark on the target at all times. So you're always ending your pattern with Chaos Strike to get 14%, and you're just pressing Reaver's Glaive on cooldown, essentially. So it's actually very easy to play in raid. Best overall, Aldrachi Reaver and Fel-Scarred, tied. Ultimately, both hero talent specializations have their specific use cases with current tuning and design that will both have both relevant depending on content types, with a relatively large loss to not be flexible and swap between them as the situation demands. Yeah, it's kind of what I was saying. Like, you'll have the option to play both. I think you won't be punished either way if you decide to go with one or the other. They will have their strengths, they'll have their weaknesses, but it's going to be up to you, which I think is a great place to be in, because having actual choice is a good thing. We didn't have choice before. It was just Aldrachi Reaver. In every situation, every scenario, Aldrachi Reaver. So the fact that you can get away with playing Fel-Scarred now, if you want to, is awesome. Okay, hero talent feedback. Aldrachi Reaver. Ultimately, Reaver's Glaive does not feel like an exciting button to hit, as most of the value will come from buffs and debuffs, with near 100% uptime in Thrill of the Fight and Reaver's Mark. By the way, Thrill of the Fight is the main talent at the bottom of the tree that makes this one so powerful, right? After consuming both enhancements, gain Thrill of the Fight, increasing your attack speed by 15% for 20 seconds and your damage and healing by 20% for 10 seconds. So there's an overlap of the 20% increase from this, so your abilities are doing 20% more damage. And then you also have Reaver's Mark on your target, making them take 14% more. Due to Wounded Quarry being a major source of soul generation to generate more Reaver's Glaive uses, as well as the damage amp on Reaver's Mark, the inability to target swap cleanly often feels frustrating rather than rewarding for sticking onto your target. Fel-Scarred. Fel-Scarred has major issues on being impactful on single target that focused hatred fails to solve. This talent also causes you to lose priority damage when any form of AoE or cleave is introduced, as it only does bonus damage when damaging a single target instead of doing increased damage to your current target. Monster Rising and Enduring Torment buffing you outside of Metamorphosis makes very little sense in the theme of Fel-Scarred, and causes some abilities to deal more damage outside of Demon Form windows such as Immolation Aura. So, get this, right? This is a good point to bring up. Monster Rising, agility increases by 8% while not in Demon Form. Enduring Torment, the effects of your Demon Form persist outside of it in a weakened state, increasing Chaos Strike and Blade Dance damage by 10% and Haste by 5%. So these are buffing your damage outside of meta. With Burning Blades, is that what it's called? Burning Blades? Or is it? Burning Blades, yeah. So your blades burn with fel energy, causing your Chaos Strike, Throw Glaive, and auto attacks to deal an additional 35% damage as fire over 6 seconds. This talent is bugged, where it includes Chaos Strike, but it doesn't include Annihilation. So, because Chaos Strike is getting buffed by Enduring Torment and Monster Rising when you're outside of your demon form, and Annihilation isn't included in Burning Blades, Chaos Strike is actually doing more damage than Annihilation. In the grand scheme of things, after it's all been funneled through Burning Blades, or hasn't been funneled through Burning Blades, and it's been affected by these other two talents, Chaos Strike does more damage than pressing Annihilation, which just doesn't make sense. So that's why Burning Blades was nerfed this last build, is because they intend to add Annihilation into Burning Blades, because they buffed it up by 60% previously, because they thought everything was working properly, but it just wasn't doing enough damage. And then after they buffed it to 60%, they realized, oh shit, Annihilation isn't actually working with this. So that's why they pulled it back, and now they're going to add Annihilation, which hopefully should level everything out. Base Havoc Demon Hunter gameplay and talents. There were no talent changes in the War Within for Havoc Demon Hunter. The base gameplay is lightly impacted by hero talents, where Fel-Scarred has more setup to get abilities on cooldown before metamorphosis due to violent transformation. For Aldrachi Reaver, constant usage of Chaos Strike and sticking on your target due to Wounded Quarry for Soul Generation is best, which reduces value in movement talents such as Inertia. This causes Havoc for single target and raid scenarios to typically play low mover builds that do not utilize Inertia, and go with Cycle of Hatred and Shattered Destiny for higher metamorphosis uptime. So, good news for everyone out there who hates movement. In Raid, you will likely not be playing movement. I'm happy to tell you. Now, keep in mind, low movers still means you'll probably be using Vengeful Retreat, but I think most people don't mind pressing Vengeful Retreat every 20 seconds. That's okay. Right, so should you play Havoc Demon Hunter in the War Within? Havoc is still a great option if you'd like to play a specialization with good self-sustain and high mobility. With current tuning, Fel Rush is unlikely to be used as part of your DPS rotation in raid encounters. However, Mythic Plus and open world builds will still utilize Inertia, which may not be comfortable or enjoyable to play for every person. Havoc could still use some balancing between Fel-Scarred and Aldrachi Reaver, including both hero talent trees. Could receive nerfs for base Havoc Demon Hunter buffs. Could receive nerfs for base Havoc Demon Hunter buffs, as both trees can contribute significantly more than most specs rely on. So there it is. I hope that sort of clarifies things for anyone wondering. If you guys want to read this on your own, or you want to reference it, there you go, there's the link in chat. And yeah, I think honestly, I was worried about how these were going to stack up against each other. I think this is probably an okay spot to be in going into the expansion, considering it's coming out next week. Because this is coming out next week, I mean, you guys don't have to keep in mind, just because it's shipping a certain way when the expansion launches doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. There's tuning that happens constantly, even after the expansion launches. You know, in the following days, there's going to be Heroic Week, where Blizzard is going to get data on how each class and spec is performing in Raid, and they're going to get a much larger sample size in terms of data, because there's going to be so many more people participating in those raids compared to the beta testing on the beta realms that we had. So if anything worries you right now, don't worry. It might get changed. Could work out for the better. But yeah, there you go.